Alright. Hey everybody, Coach Steel Bill coming to you from the Bob Donald 69 channel. In my last video, I talked about how to get reloading supplies, how to get ammunition, so forth, or rather how I do it. And, as you can see, it paid off. Alright, I can't help from going jingle shells, jingle shells, jingle all the way. It's Christmas and today. Yeah. 500 pieces of brand new Starline 454 Casull brass. Now, why am I excited? It's been so long ago since I back ordered that stuff, I totally forgot about it. So when it showed up, I was like, what in the world? When I seen that Starline emblem on it, I'm like, oh, that's my 45 brass. Well, obviously 45 brass is still going to the manufacturers. So that's a good thing and it's a bad thing to hear that. Alright, why is it a bad thing? That means that the 45 rounds are still in extremely high demand, okay? Unlike the 454 Casull rounds, because everybody's not toting a 454 Casull round with them. So that tells me two things. Yes, we still are in stress. The manufacturers and suppliers are still stressed, but things are starting to catch up. The fact that I got these 454 Casull brass before I got the 45 tells me that things are catching up good, because I ordered these after I ordered the 45. So and for a long time these weren't available. So that tells me things are slowly but surely catching up. Okay, so being as excited as I obviously am that this brass came in, because I literally just quit reloading because of it. What I've decided to do is I'll go ahead and go through a basic walkthrough of reloading a pistol cartridge, all right? And also, I've had questions or read questions by other people as well about the possibility of reloading aluminum casing. Now, to answer your question, can it be done? Yeah, it can be done. It most certainly can be done. Here's one right there. It's seated. It took a really nice factory crimp. I don't know if you had it loaded hot, if it would hold the crimp or not, you know. I don't see why it wouldn't. But there's one problem that I noticed with it that I overlooked to begin with. So I did this one. It doesn't have a primer in it, and it doesn't have a primer in it, and it doesn't have any powder in it. I just did it to see what the effect of the aluminum would be on the bullet, and actually it turned out quite nice. But this is a standard, okay, primer. You see, okay, it's just got the little hole in there. This is the primer case to an aluminum. Can you see what's going on? Maybe I can get it to focus. I wish I could get it to focus. That's what I wish I could do. Come on now, too close. Alright, anyway, maybe you can see it, maybe you cannot. Let me back up a little more, maybe it'll focus on that. Anyhow, the primer, the base of the bullet inside the cup, at the very bottom of the primer cup, will blow and burn out the aluminum. Okay, let me find another one that's a little... Alright, here's your real good example. All right. See how that's blowed out? Can you see? Where's... That's too much. Okay, anyway, maybe you can see that a little better. Can you see how that's blowed out? The whole bottom of that primer cup is burnt out. And what I'm seeing is where the anvil, okay, is blowing out. Oops, that's the wrong way. It's blowing out around the legs of the anvil in the primer cap. So, can you reload them? Yes, you can. Would I do it? Only if the zombie apocalypse had already hit and this was the only thing I had to use. What are these right now? Scrap aluminum. All right, everybody, let's do what I was talking about earlier. And let's reload some 454 Casull. We'll keep that one just for S&Gs. Like I said earlier today, I got in a box of 500 pieces of Starline brass. Brand new, spanking, pretty. I prefer the nickel, but they didn't have, that wasn't available. Okay, the old Starline. And what I decided I would do is I want to load some of these up so bad that I would go ahead and load up a few. And while I was doing it, I would do a video. I got one of my viewers made the comment that he watched the video I did in the past. It was kind of a pseudo video about reloading. And his comment was, I didn't learn anything. Well, I don't know if that was me or his ability to absorb. But either way, I thought, well, let me just go ahead and do a basic step-by-step reloading of a pistol cartridge. And in this case, we're going to load up some 454 Casull. I'll be back. All right. This is going to be a basic 101 reloading video for the most part. I can get you set up here without screwing up anymore. Alright, as I've said in other videos, reloading is exactly like cooking a box cake. If you can read and follow directions and you have all the necessary proper equipment to do it with, you can reload. So, I'm going to start off by this. To start with, you're going to need some different stuff. You're going to need equipment, obviously. I'm trying to find me a decent point. This will work. So, the first thing I do is identify what caliber I'm going to reload. Okay? And so with that, I have to have 4 basic components. I have to have my brass casing. I have to have primers. I have to have powder. And I have to have a bullet. And all 4 of these components need to be recognized and identified in a recipe, okay, in your reloading manual. Now, before I start reloading, I take my manual and I look at my recipes. I tab my manuals to what calibers that I reload. There's no point in me digging through the manual hunting something that I don't reload. That's wasting my time. So I tab my pages so that whatever caliber I want to go to, I just look at it, open it up, and I'm right there. In this case, it opened up to 45 Colt. Tonight, we're going to reload 454 Casull. Maybe it's the next page. I try to tab the page ahead of the actual one because, well, this probably, let's see. Yeah, I'm still in 45 Colt. Some manuals will give you more, some will give you less information. Okay, 454 Casull. And up here at the top, it tells me what my dimensions are, what my case length should be, what my overall length should be, etc. The type of primer I should use, it goes in the case, the proper primer. It gives me all of my marginal information that I need to make sure that I'm matching up the proper components for the caliber that I'm about to put together. It gives you cartridge case data, ballistics data, and so forth. Okay, come on over here to your first recipe, which will be 250 grains, which, if I am not mistaken, that's what we're going to be. These are 240 grains. All right. Okay. Well, with that said, let me say this. Look at this manual. Spear. Look at the bullet manufacturer. Okay. Hornady. So what will be the logical thing for me to do? Logical thing will be to do is this. Put that back up on the shelf. Not saying that they don't have a 240 grain bullet up there in 454 Casull, but I didn't see one. And that means I've either got to add or reduce in powder, or go down to the next lowest recipe and use it, and then work my way up to the level that I want to. A lot of bullets and brass and primers being shot to figure out where you want to be. So what I would do in that case is I would logically use my Hornady reloading manual. Okay, well, this manual here, this one is the 10th edition, and pretty good, pretty good. I don't know if there's a new edition out yet or not. Okay, Hornady, this is 10th edition, but I'm using Hornady bullets. So logically, I want to go to someone who made the product and use their tested recipes. 45 Colt revolver, 45 Colt Ruger, and Thompson Contender. That's the way I load a lot of my 45s, because my gun will take it. It shoots a 454 Casull, so it'll take anything that the Thompson Contender can throw at it in 45. All right, 454 Casull. Handgun, Freedom Arms, is tested. The barrel length is 7.5 inches. The case is Hornady. Primer is Federal 205. Bullet diameter .452. Maximum case overall length is 1.765. Maximum case length is 1.383. Case trim length is 1.373. And I'll talk to you about case trimming and all that stuff as we go along and start reloading. All right, so as you can see in my manual, I've got different recipes highlighted. And actually what I've got highlighted are different powders, okay? And those are the powders that I actually possess at the time. Why do I highlight it? Well, it's easier to go back to it. I got old eyes, okay? So I have a certain powder highlighted in this pink red shit, H110, I have it in. Accurate number 9, I've got it in. Now, another thing I do also while I'm on the subject is I take a photograph of these recipes in these books, okay? And that way, when I'm out swinging by the local wherever store that might sell reloading supplies or do sell reloading supplies, because I don't ordinarily reload with these other powders, they're not in my mind. I'm not kind of looking for them. I'm looking for that H110. I'm looking for the Accurate number 9. I'm looking for Type Group. I'm looking for Universal. You know, I'm not looking for something that I normally use. So if none of those items are on the shelf that I can find or I see on the shelf, I keep a photograph of this thing on my phone. That way I can go to it, and there just might possibly be a couple of these recipes or a couple of these powders up here that I don't have highlighted. It might be on the shelf, and I very well could be missing the opportunity of buying a powder that I could use without realizing it. I am not so ingrained and knowledgeable about powders to where I could and don't ever mix powders, but I don't remember enough to know if this powder by this company has the same burn rate as this powder by this company, so forth. And with that said, I also, according to the index in the book up here in the front, you'll have a powder burn chart, okay? And it starts from the fastest burning powder and goes to the slowest burning powder. And what I've learned also is that the slower burning powder are typically used in your bigger caliber guns, all right? You'll look in it later on and you'll see that the powder that is the slowest burning one on the burn chart, so forth, and you get over here into 50 BMG and so forth, those are the powders they're using. Same thing with my 454 Casull. This isn't what I'm going to use, but what I did was I put the burn rate of the powder in Sharpie or magic marker on the side of my can here. And this way, as I work with them and I look with them, I learned the comparison of their burn rates just by simply knowing that number's on the side of the can. All right, 460, we don't want to do 460. We don't want to do 45 Winchester Magnum, which I have used those recipes in my 45 Colt. 45, I went past it. 470 Lime Blanc, that would be nice to have. 4570 Nomad. Where the shit? All right, here we go. We're back 454 Casull. All right, so here we are right here. The bullet we're going to use is this one right here. Okay, it's 240 grain XTP Magnum. Y'all, if you're loading 454 Casull, don't use a regular 45 bullet in it. It's not, the cast I don't think is hard enough. Get Magnum bullets for the 454 Casull. Alright, you selected your powder, you got all your components together, you looked in your recipe, you decided what recipe you're going to use. Now the next thing you want to do is zero your scales. Alright, and what I do is, just to get the manual out of my way, I take and I write my recipe down here on my paper that I'm going to put with my cartridges. And on it, a lot of your stuff you get will come with these little guys. But on it, when you buy bullets, it'll come with it. It has my charge weight, or excuse me, my cartridge, which is a 454 Casull, the bullet weight, which is 240 grains. The powder is H110. The charge weight is going to be hot. I'm going to tell the charge weight because I don't want you to do shit without using a recipe. It's your call. The primer is a CCI, small rifle primer. And the case overall length, oh, excuse me, I didn't write that on there. Anyway, I'm charging it to 1,800 feet per second. No, it's supposed to be 1,850 feet per second. Anyway, that's my feet per second that I'm charging it to, 1,850 feet per second. And the last is my case overall length, which is 1.754. 1.754. That's something else you need also if you're loading automatic rounds. You really need a pair of calipers. All right. And a trickler, it doesn't hurt to have one of those. I've yet to use mine, but I had it just in case one day I decided to. If you're loading automatic rounds, 9mm, 45 APC, so on and so forth, you've got to have a pair of calipers. Now tonight, the caliper isn't going to be that important because I'm going to be loading on this bullet right here. There's a crimp groove on there. Okay, see that ring right here around the bullet? That's where we're going to be seating the bullet down into the brass, down to that point right there, and that's where we're going to crimp it at. So the calipers and having the exact overall length isn't that critical, because in revolvers, you got a little bit of leadway with revolvers. But with auto feeders, you need to be very precise, or as precise as you can be, because it's got to go down into the magazine, and it also has to be able to feed into the ramp without problems. You know, if you got it too long sometimes, or even too short sometimes, you'll have feed issues. Okay, enough of that. Back with the video. All right, I've balanced my scales. Okay, I've zeroed them. Yeah, I might be a little bit hot, but I'm close enough anyway. And my next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my powder and I'm going to put it up here in my throw. Make sure it's closed. Y'all weren't with me a minute ago. I pulled my powder throw container off, and before I closed it, yeah, I had Dad Blame Universal all over the table. All right, so I don't know how many I'm going to load tonight overall. So I'll put enough in there that I figure we'll probably do about 25 to 30 at a minimum. I keep my powder that I'm using on the table for the most part, but because I take my recipe and write it down, and then after I write it down, I drop it in my hopper on top of my powder. This way I know exactly what I'm doing and why and how I'm doing it with that powder throw. And this way I'm able to set my H110 not back all the way in there to where I normally keep it, but up front there. But it's off my table here. It's off my workspace. It's not real big, but I don't need it to be big. It's big enough for everything I need to do. All right, so I've zeroed my scales. I've got all my components together. I've selected the powder that I'm going to use. I've selected the recipe that I'm going to use, which is another thing. I put my book back up on the shelf because I don't need it anymore. I got my recipe wrote down and everything's right there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my powder throw, okay, for what the recipe is calling. All right, so let me get my hand out of the way. All right, the powder throw, you take this right here and you adjust it out, and that increases the volume of powder that will fall down into it when I rotate this, okay? What I'll do is I'll bring this up like that, and when I do, it will flow from the container up here down into this cylinder right here, all right? And when I bring it down, I have my brass. I hold my brass up under it like that, okay? And with my other hand free, I bring this handle down. When I bring it down, it throws a charge into my casing, okay? Sometimes I do it one by one. Sometimes I'll do a group of them at a time, which I'll probably do tonight. I need to get my little carrier and stuff together. And so I'm going to pause you, and while I'm paused, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my powder throw to to the weight that I'm going to be putting into the cartridge, and then we'll start reloading some bullets. All right, now part of my recipe weight calls for 7 grains, okay? Now, how you set these scales like this is you take your grain marker over to the 7 grains. Okay, I can't really see it on here, but you take it to the 7 grains. And how do you know that your 7 grains equal? Well, up here in the tenths, you'll have a full white window here, a bar full here, and a full white bar on this window over here. And the ones next to it on each side, you'll have teeny tiny little slithers of white. Alright, so you match up those slithers being equal and having full white bars on both sides of your tents, then that tells you you're dead on zero, 7 grains. Alright, the next thing I want to do is I want to adjust my powder throw to my scales. So what I do is I've got my scales set, okay, to the amount that I want to use as a charge. And I come over here to my powder throw and I bring it up. I give it a couple of taps to make sure I get a good throw. I put it on and it's not enough. So what I do is I come over here and, as I explained earlier, I open up the cylinder more. And I'll just go ahead, depending on how heavy it seems to be, I'll go ahead and open it up, be pretty liberal with it. You got a lock nut on here that once you find your throw, you bring that lock nut down and lock it in place. Now I check it about every 15 or so rounds, my weight after I start throwing, just to make sure that I haven't lost any adjustment. Still need to come up. I'm going to go bring it on up here. Alright, let's see what we got here. Alright, we're moving scales now. So what I'll do is I'll make 1, 2, I'll just go ahead and give it 2 or 3 full spins. I should be pretty close to where I need to be now, if not maybe a little bit over. Sometimes I've gotten lucky and got dead on. And I'm a little over today. All right, let's see what happens when I bring it down. Let's see where we're at now. Pow! Dead on it. I'll be back. Okay, we've selected all our components. We've selected our recipes. We've selected the powder we're going to use, etc. We have all that knowledge. Now we need to go to the very first step of actual reloading our material. First thing I want to do is I want to get me some CCI. In this recipe, it calls for CCI small rifle primers, okay? And that would be number 450 on the CCI calendar. And then I'll take these CCI primers and fight them to get them open. There we go. Okay, these come in rows of 10. All right. Let me see if I can help this a little bit. And what I do is I take them and I flip them over into one of these recycled, handy dandy, Jif peanut butter, multi-use primer flipper over, okay? You can buy these things also for about $5, $6 a piece. The primers are rounded on the head and they're coarse on the bottom. So when you shake the lid, okay, the coarse bottom parts of it catch and it flips them over on the dome. Now, I'll be there. Every one of them's over there. It don't take much. It's not rocket surgery. All right, next thing I want to do is I want to select my primer arm, okay? In this case, it's the small. I have a large and I have a small, okay? And so I raise up my ram. Take the shell holder out. You don't have to do that. I just do it. Okay, drop my primer arm down in there. Put my shell holder, proper shell holder for what I'm using, back in my round. Now I'm ready to prime. You take the primer. Some people use gloves. These are small. I can't grab them with gloves. Put your Make sure there's not trash down in it. Put your primer cap in it. Primer cap. Okay. Take your brass, unprimed, put it in your shell holder, bring the ram down, and it seats the primer into your casing. Now, you'll get into a habit after you do these, as you start to put them away, you just run your finger across the top of it, okay? You want to make sure that your primer is seated, I would say in this case, 4/100ths, of an inch below the face of the brass. And all right, when I do that, I put it back over here. I put it upside down. This way I know it's been primed. I'm going to flip them all over in a minute. Again, I take my unprimed brass, I put it in my shell holder. Okay, bring my ram down, give me a primer. I put it in the primer arm. I bring my ram down, seat it into my brass real good. Run my finger across the top, make sure it's seated real well. Alright, I'm going to pause you. I'll bring you back after I get the rest of these primed up, and we go to the next step. Alrighty, we've got our brass all primed up. Now, I'm going to say this, but I shouldn't have to, but I'm going to say it anyway. Why would you want to be sure to prime your brass before you put powder in it? Okay, now if I have to explain that, just go ahead and turn the video off and go watch something else on TV. Alright, got it primed up. Now we're going to throw our powder. And just like I said over here, what I do is I start with this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I go to the back row, and I turn it around and I fill the rest of them up. Won't take me just a jiffy. I'll be back. Alright, I got my powders thrown. Alright, I'm going to bring them over here, and I'm going to take a flashlight. Now, these right here, I really don't have to. I can, because it's new brass and it's shiny, I can see, it's right at the top. But you want to take a flashlight and look down in it, make sure your powder throws are consistent, make sure they're uniform, make sure you didn't miss one. Okay? Now, I intentionally left one unpowdered for the simple fact. Which one is it? You see which one it is? That one right there. It's obviously different. But make sure that you take a flashlight, take the time to look in it, and make sure they're all consistent and they all have powder in them. Alright. I made a mistake. It wasn't a crucial mistake, but I made a mistake. I got ahead of myself a little bit, and I skipped a task that I should have done before I powdered them. With my press, I can do it anyway because I have a powder through flare. And what I failed to do was to flare my brass a little bit before I charged it. Now, I've already got it charged, but it doesn't mean that I can't bring it up into my round, up my flare, and still give it a flare. Okay? When I say give it a flare, what you want to do is you want to flare the top of your brass just a little bit at the very top. And why? Because you want your bullet to sit into it so it will guide down into the casing, okay, without putting undue stress on the mouth of the case and possibly causing the case to crimp. Sometimes it'll do it anyway. Now, I have got these cartridges loaded hot, and looking at them, it very well could be almost it's 3 grains away from being a compressed load. So next thing I want to do after I flare it, stick my bullet in the top of it here, and making sure your bullet is straight up and down as much as possible before you do anything else. I want to bring my die over here to my bullet set. Alright, now I don't remember if I have this set for 45 or 354 Casull. So I'm going to go ahead and back my set off to where I know it isn't going to set my bullet to the point deeper than it should be. Okay, it started my bullet a little bit. I'm a long ways out from my crimp groove, but I see how much room and how much distance I need. So what I do is I kind of look up here and go, all right, that's about that much right there. But don't go overdo it, because you wind up having to beat your bullet back out of the case. All right, I'm real close. Only need just a little bit more. So I tweak it just a little bit more. Try it again. Check it. I'm right at the very top of it. I'm going to do half of what I did the last time. I'm in the crimp groove, but I want to be just a little bit more because I'm going to put a factory roll crimp on it. This puts a good taper on it. Alright, I'm where I want to be, and you saw me push down on my handle good. That gave me a real nice crimp, or excuse me, taper groove on this. Alright, but if I force my fingernail down in here between the brass and the top of that ring that's around it right there, I can still feel a little bit of the stippling from it. Now I'm going to bring it over here and I'm going to put it in my factory roll crimp. I'll bring it up. Make sure I'm set good. That puts a real nice factory crimp on. Okay. Take it and I'll flip it upside down. Actually, what I need to do is just go ahead and put it in this. Now, when I finish filling this up off of that recipe, I'll take that card out of my powder throw and I'll put it in here. I'll stick it to the top right here where these old recipes were. And this way I'll always know what I've got, what everything is, because once it goes into that green case and it sits on the shelf for a while, you'll look at it and go, what in the world did I do? Is this a 300 grain pill? How much does I got it loaded for? It's obvious it's a small rifle primer or a small pistol primer. It's obvious that it's Starline brass. It's obvious that it's a hollow point, a deep curl, possibly by Spear, possibly by Hornady. But if you don't have it wrote down, you got a memory like mine, your guess is as good as mine. Okay? So, let's do this one more time. All right. After you prime your brass and everything, the next thing you want to do is bring it over here to your flare. Bring it up into your flare. A nice little flare on it. Okay. Then I'm sorry, somebody was calling me. Then you want to take and put your powder in it. Okay. Now I should have went ahead before I put the powder in these guys right here. I should have went ahead and flared them. But and with my die, what I can do is I can actually, and I was going to do this, I can bring it up in here to the flare, and then I can take a funnel, or I've got one of these gizmos that does it automatically, and I put my little funnel in up there. I could get my powder throw, and I could dump it in on the top up here and flare and powder it at the same time. But I prefer just to go do it stage at a time. Alright, so I got my flare on it. Bring it around over here to my bullet set. I don't know where to put my bullet set. Again, I'm using Hornady Magnum 240 grain XTP. Pull some out for right now. We'll do 5 of them, then I'll turn you loose. Alright, so next thing I want to do is I want to take my bullet, put it on my brass, straight up and down if possible, run my round up into my bullet set. Check it, make sure it's where I want it. and it is. Actually, I'm going to back off just a tiny amount. Okay, now I'm going to put a nice factory roll crimp on it. A bada bing, a bada boom, boom, boom. You ready to rock and roll, man? That's it. Ain't no point in me keeping you here just to keep doing this. If you're using fired brass, once fired brass, one of the first things you want to do is run it through a all right, let's say that this hasn't been deprimed yet. I've already deprimed it and put it in my vibrator and all that stuff. What you want to do is you want to put it in your shell holder, bring it up, ram up, and what it'll do is bring it up into this resizer. Okay, 4 stages. Start with the resizing decapping die. This die will resize your once fired brass or your fired brass. Okay. It has a pin right here that will protrude through the base of the brass and punch the fired primer out. And at the same time, there's a carbide die in here that will resize your brass back down to the caliber that it should be. Your next stage, and this one is a powder through. I don't know if you can see, you can see light through it there. All right, what this does is puts the light flare on your brass to set your bullet into. The next one is your bullet seat. The top right here, you can adjust it out, okay, for less into the case. You adjust it down for more into the case. You have to play with it a little bit, like I showed you a minute ago, to get to where you needed to do. When you press down on it, you find it puts a taper crimp onto the case, which you would have to use for a auto loader for the most part. All right, and your last but not least, not all of them, but you have a 4 set, and I highly recommend this for revolvers, is get a factory crimp die. This will put a nice factory roll crimp on your brass, and it helps keep and eliminate crimp jump. Okay, so explanation of the dies there. One more, and I'll shut you off. All right, I've got my brass primed. I'm going to flare the top, prime it, flare it, powder it, set it in, set your bullet. Again, try not to set it crooked in there because it may bend and crimp your brass. Come over here to your bullet seat. If you have a single stage die, you change these dies out. I have this was a Lee Value Classic Turret auto indexing. I've never used it in the auto indexing stage. I like using it at a single stage, but the cool thing about it is I don't have to take the dies out for my next step. I just bring it around, bring it around, bring it around. All right. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad you joined me. I hope this video was of some education. I realize it's a long-ass video. Thank you very much for joining me. And for as far as the basics and the how-tos of reloading, there you go. Long video for a little bit. I love you. I mean it. Adios, mi amigos. Au revoir. Bye.